The 19th century in Nepal was just completely revolutionary. It was a wild ride, really. It kicked off with this ambitious modernizer, got shattered by a war with a global superpower, and it all came down to a single night of bloodshed that created a family dynasty that would last for over 100 years. So let's break down exactly how that all happened.
So, here's how we're going to break down this incredible story. First, we'll look at the era of relative stability under Bhimsen Thapa. Then, we'll dive into the war that threw the entire nation into chaos. After that, we get to the single night of violence that changed everything, the infamous Kot Massacre. And finally, we'll see how the Rana regime rose from those very ashes.
Okay, so before we jump in, let's get our bearings on the timeline. The whole century is really defined by two massive power shifts. You've got Bhimsen Thapa's rise in 1806, and then the formal start of the Rana dynasty in 1856. And the two crucial events that drove this whole transformation? The Anglo-Nepal War and the absolutely brutal Kot Massacre.
All right, let's kick things off with the man who really owned the first part of the century, Bhimsen Thapa. For a while there, he brought a level of stability and modernization to Nepal that was pretty much unheard of.
31 years. I mean, just think about that. In an age that was just full of court intrigue and constantly shifting loyalties, holding on to power for over 3 decades was an absolutely extraordinary feat. Bhimsen Thapa wasn't just a prime minister, or Mukhtiar, as the office was called. He was, for all intents and purposes, the absolute ruler of Nepal.
And he didn't just sit on that power. No, he used it with a very clear goal in mind, to build a Nepal that was strong enough to resist the growing British presence in India. And this meant a total overhaul. He modernized the army with European-style training, he set up a national postal system for better communication, and he centralized all state power right into his own office. He was basically building a modern state from the ground up. But for all his efforts to build up Nepal, there was this massive, inevitable collision course he was on with the British East India Company. This conflict, well, it would bring his era of stability to a violent end and usher in a brand new period of total chaos.
You see, by the early 1810s, Nepal's expansion had pushed it right up against the rapidly expanding British territory in India. Border disputes were pretty much inevitable, and they escalated fast. In 1814, the British declared war, and this kicked off a conflict that would test Nepal to its absolute limits.
After 2 years of really brutal fighting, Nepal was defeated. The result was the Treaty of Sugauli. And the terms? They were harsh. Nepal lost about a third of its entire territory. We're talking valuable lands that would later become famous Indian hill stations like Shimla and Mussoorie. This wasn't just a loss, it was a devastating blow that completely ended their expansionist dreams forever.
But even in defeat, the Nepalese soldiers, wow, they earned the fierce respect of their enemies. This tribute here, from the commanding British general to a fallen Nepalese commander, Bhakti Thapa, it just captures the incredible bravery of the Nepalese forces. It's a really powerful testament to their valor.
That military defeat, it was the beginning of the end for Bhimsen Thapa. His whole political identity was built on standing up to the British, and losing the war just completely discredited him. His rivals at court saw their chance. In 1837, they managed to turn the king against him. Thapa was thrown in prison, and he eventually took his own life. His death ripped away the one stabilizing force in Nepali politics, creating this massive power vacuum that just ripped the lid off, unleashing nearly 10 years of pure chaos. Plots, counterplots, assassinations, you name it.
And all that instability, all that chaos, it was all leading to one single, incredibly bloody climax on a night in 1846. What happened in that palace courtyard, the Kot, wouldn't just end the chaos. It would install a new, even more absolute form of rule.
It's a pretty shocking question, right? But it's literally what happened. How can an entire political class be wiped out overnight? Well, the answer lies with one very ambitious and utterly ruthless man.
The architect of this whole thing was a young nobleman named Jung Bahadur Rana. And let me tell you, he was a master of intrigue. He used the assassination of a royal favorite as a pretext to convince the queen to summon all the high-ranking nobles to the Kot courtyard for an emergency meeting. And once they were all there, gathered and unarmed, he sprang his trap. He turned that courtyard into a killing field and systematically eliminated every single one of his potential rivals. 55. Just let that number sink in for a second. 55 high-ranking nobles and officials, all killed in a single night. Jung Bahadur didn't just defeat his enemies, he completely annihilated the entire political establishment.
It was a brutally effective move that ended the power struggles instantly, leaving him the one undisputed master of Nepal.
And so, from the literal ashes of the old nobility, a new dynasty rose. The Kot Massacre wasn't just another coup. It was the birth of the Rana regime, an autocratic system that would go on to dominate Nepal for the next 104 years.
Now, Jung Bahadur's move here was, frankly, genius. He didn't get rid of the king. No, instead, he had the king give him the title of Maharaja and declare the office of Prime Minister a hereditary position, passed down through the Rana family. The Shah king was still there, but he was basically a prisoner in his own palace, a revered figurehead with absolutely zero real power. All the authority now belonged to the Rana Prime Minister.
I mean, the change was just absolute. Let's look at the before and after. Before 1846, the Shah king was the ultimate authority, and you had all these noble families constantly fighting for power. After 1846, the Rana prime minister held all the authority, the job was hereditary, and power was monopolized by just one family. It was a complete and total reset of the nation's politics. So with power in hand, Jung Bahadur and his family spent the next few decades locking it all down. He made a very shrewd alliance with the British, helping them put down the Indian Mutiny in 1857, and as a reward, the British actually returned some of the territory Nepal had lost, known as the Naya Muluk. And even after he died, the family's grip held firm, surviving intense internal power struggles like a violent coup in 1885 where one branch of the family actually seized control from another.
So when you step back and look at it, the 19th century completely remade Nepal's political landscape. It went from a monarchy with competing nobles to an absolute hereditary prime ministership. The Rana dynasty, born from a single night of bloodshed, would isolate Nepal and hold it in a tight grip for over a century. And that leaves us with one big question. When one family holds absolute power for that long, what happens?